So let's create a to-do app. I'm not going to use any library, any tool, any framework, just vanilla JavaScript with some CSS and HTML. So I'm going just to create a new folder called to-do app, just an empty folder, right? So then back to Visual Studio, I'm going to open that folder. So we got to-do app, right? It's empty. There is literally nothing, as you can see here, right? So I'm going to create a file, the entry file, index.html. And to create the index.html, I'm going to create a basic structure, HTML with the header, and then with the body, and then welcome to the to-do app, and then on the header, let's add a title called, the same thing, right? Welcome to the to-do app, or maybe as to-do app to keep it simpler. Right. So how can we prove this works? So I'm going to, because we don't have any node server, we don't have anything, just an HTML file. So I'm going to copy the path and then back to Chrome. Welcome to the to-do app. And then, because I'm going to keep switching from the editor to the browser, and just thinking about productivity, as you already know, you see, I have the code on the left-hand side and the browser on the right-hand side, right?
Do you need doctype
HTML.
so that the browser knows?
Yeah, you feel free to do it. I'm not going to do it because I want to focus on the example. But yes, of course, feel free to add the doc type on top. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
It's more important when you put it online.
Yes. So, right. So, because this is an app, I need HTML. I got HTML already, right? We also need CSS, right? So let's create a CSS file and let's see if we can bind them somehow, right? So I'm going to create a new file called styles.css. Obviously, this architecture only works for very simple projects, right? As soon as this project grows, we will have to rethink our folder structure. But we're going to build something simple. So let's try not to do any kind of over-engineering works. Just let's keep it very, very, very simple. So, and as part of that styles, let's add a test if it works. So we're going to do body, background, color, yellow. Right? This is not going to work yet, obviously, because on the index we are not linking the CSS file exactly. So to link a CSS file, you can do link, and then if I'm correct, you can pass a rel attribute called stylesheet, I believe, and then you can pass href with the link to the CSS file. Type text type CSS. Yeah, I mean, not against that. I mean, there are different ways to do it, right? Find your favorite one. This is one of them, and you see it works, right? Right. So as I see it works, I'm going just to remove that because I don't want to have a yellow background color, right? This is not the Angular homepage in 2011, so let's keep it white. And then, so we got HTML, we got CSS, but let's add JavaScript. Something that is subtle but important is you may see that sometimes the scripts are added at the bottom.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, I could add the script on top, but I'm going to add it at the bottom. And the reason is, if you add it at the bottom, so first of all, the HTML will be rendered first. So that means that if I need to access the HTML, which of course I'll have to, at the time the script is rendered, the HTML will be ready. So I can interact with it, right? So I'm going to add script src, and then obviously I need to create a JavaScript file. So let's just do it, right? So we can do, how we're going to call it, controller. Again, this is a horrible name if you are building something complex, but for now it should work. So controller.javascript, right? And remember to close the tags in that way. Don't try to do the React thingy like that, because this is not always valid on HTML. So if you do that, is safer. And then on the controller, let's just add an alert just to prove again that it works, right? So we are not trying to bring the perfect solution all the time. We're just trying to do baby steps. Do a small step, prove it works, and then continue to the next step, right? So let's see if it works. You see, hello TODO app. So I've bound my HTML to my CSS and to my JavaScript. Cool. Any question up until now?
But you, I mean, I understand why you keep your JavaScript separate file, but you could do it.
You can do it in line. That's true. You can do it in line. But if you separate it, it's like a good thing, right? Because you can prove that you can perform kind of separation of concerns.
How did you get the link in the browser?
The link, right? So it's a link on the hard drive, right? So you do right click,
Okay.
copy path, and then you paste it on the browser, right? Depending on the editor, there will be a different way. But literally, this is a link to your hard drive. You see, users, blah, 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 blah. Right?
Visual Studio.
Right. So let's add some logic to it. And this is the complex part. And this is where, because up until now, everything has been very generic, right? We've done nothing. But let's talk about the TODO app. So the first thing I'm going to do, just to make it even more consistent. So I know that because the script is at the bottom, it will be rendered. It will be evaluated after the HTML. But even in that case, I'm going to do something here. Look, I'm going to do onload equals, and then I'm going to call a function. So you see, so I'm telling the browser, hey, whenever the body is ready, call this function. So where is this function? On the controller, right? So this is a JavaScript function. You know how to do it. Function app ready, and then alert the app is ready. I refresh, the app is ready, right? Why I do that? Because this is my entry point. So this is, in my opinion, a more elegant approach. I know that this is the function that will be executed first. So from here, I'll keep invoking other functions doing stuff, right? So then what do we want to do? I'm going to initialize the data model. So I'm going to create a new variable called model, which is it's just an object for now. And then I'm going to, as I want to have a to-do list. So if you want to display a list of things, what's the most suitable JavaScript structure?
String.
Wrong. Arrays. We can use a string, well, but the string will be weird, right? Because we want to have multiple strings. And even further, I don't want to have an array of strings because I want to host multiple information about the to-do. Yes, I want to have the text, which is a string, read, but I also want to see if the to-do is checked or not. So how can we host that? What kind of data structure do we need? An object. So then we need an array of objects, right? So I'm going to do to-dos is an array, and just, I'm going to initialize it already. So I'm going to do, just to help myself to see where we are. I'm going to write something. I'm going to do is checked true, for example, and then the text. So text is going to be, well, it depends on what we want to build, right? So instead of welcome to TODO app, I'm going to change the title. I'm going to, let's talk about a little bit about the decorating it, right? Because this is also important. So let's add a proper title, and then let's add a subtitle, and I'm going to call it list of important JavaScript topics, things that you should know. So then I'm going to create one which is going to be called arrays, because arrays are a very important topic in JavaScript, right? So obviously if I run that, nothing will happen. Well, you see, right? Still rendering that, but let's comment that, but we got nothing, right? As I'm going to add some JavaScript, and I will probably fail at some stage, something I would recommend you to do at the very beginning is to open DevTools. Aaron, keep DevTools always open. When I'm interviewing someone and that person doesn't have the DevTools open, my original reaction is this guy is going to fail. It's impossible to build anything complex without the DevTools opens, because the DevTools will tell you lots of information about if there is any error, what's the status of the app, inspecting the DOM, checking the CSS, blah, 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 blah. It's very unprofessional to work without the DevTools, right? So I'm going to keep it open all the time. Cool. So we got the to-do, and now I would like to display this to-do. I want to see a checkbox and the text, right? And I'll be able to click on the checkbox and blah, blah, blah. But let's try to display the first to-do. Let's display it. And this is the tricky part, because unfortunately, still in 2018, JavaScript is not great to handle the state of the app. It's very complicated. It's very complicated to add elements to the UI dynamically. And you will see, because at the end of the day, if you keep working on this example, you could easily get 100 lines of code just to display something very trivial, right? And that's why we still need things like React, Vue, or Angular, right? Because they massively facilitate managing the state of the app. But hey, still, let's do that using the old school technique, right? So create app. App ready. So on app ready, I'm going to create a new function called render to-dos, something like that. I may rename it afterwards, but for now, I want to have a function to render the view, right? So what's this function? What's the goal of the function? First of all, I need to access the root element of the app, and then I need to append children. Its to-do will be a child. So then we need like a master element, right? So we need like a root element. So I'm going to create a div. So my list of to-dos will be here. And to access that container, that element, that node, I'm going to add an ID, because it's going to be unique. And the ID is going to be to-do list, for example, right? So once I got that, I can go back to JavaScript, and then I can get the pointer to that element. How can we do that? I'm going to create a variable called root node equals, that's important, that's super important, document dot, we need to access this element. Yeah, classically speaking, we could easily do that using get element by ID. However, with more recent JavaScript, you can do something called query selector. Generally speaking, I would recommend you to do that, because get element by ID is very useful, it's very performant as well, but it's just useful if you want to access the ID. And in real life, you'll have IDs, but you'll have classes, you'll have tags, you'll have attributes, right? So there will be multiple ways you would like to access the DOM. Because of that, query selector is more generic. And the syntax is the same as CSS. So how do you access an ID on CSS? Hash. With the hash, exactly. So we can do hash, if I found the symbol, yeah. So this could be hash.
It always returns just one.
It returns one, exactly. If you want to return a list, you got query selector all.
What's,
It's
can
the
I have a
first one,
question?
right? The first one is fine.
The first one,
Yeah.
correct.
Can I have a question?
Yep.
What's the difference between query selector and select element by ID?
No, there is nothing. In that particular case, the syntax will be slightly different. So if you want to use query get element by ID, it's very similar.
So it would work the same way.
Yeah. So if you get element by ID, you don't need to pass the hash. It will fail otherwise, because this is expected to be an ID already.
It's just query select is more powerful.
Yeah, query selector is more recent, is more powerful. I would recommend you to use it, because just using query selector or maybe query selector all, you can get any element from the UI, right? Otherwise, you need to remember how to use get element by ID, then how to use get element by class name, which also exists, right? So just use query selector. Keep it easy, because this is complicated enough. Right. So then we got the root node, and we want to display the list of to-dos. So to do that, and I'll try to stop saying to do that, because it's confusing with to-dos, right? So to make this real, I'm going to iterate over this array, and you already know how to do it, right? So we can do model.todos.forEach. We could use map as well, right? But I don't want to return anything, so I just want to iterate and for each element on the to-do list, I want to display it. So if we use for each, then we receive each individual element of the to-dos, which is one to-do, which is an object, right? So then I can go to the root node and say root node, and this is important, how to add elements to that node. We can do append child, and then we can append a new DOM element. But what is the to-do DOM element? It doesn't exist yet. It doesn't exist yet. We just have an array of objects, but we don't have an array of DOM elements. Because of that, we need to build it. We need to create a new div, a new label, a new span, a new whatever. So let's do it. I'm going to create another function called get to-do node that receives the to-do object. And then let's create that function. Function get to-do node. In reality, look, the only thing I want to do, I literally want to do that. I want to do div input type checkbox, right? Whatever, and then arrays. I want to do something like that. A very simple piece of HTML. But to do that in an efficient manner, there are different ways to do that. There are different ways. Technically speaking, and this is important you to remember, because if you have to do that, you will have to tell the employer why you are doing this, right? So technically speaking, and actually I'm going to do that first, just to show that my theory is correct. So we could do, this is oversimplified, but just to show you the idea. So we could do root node.inner HTML equals type checkbox, right? Something like that. Again, not perfect, but let's see if that makes any sense, right? So model.todos, right? It's interesting because now it's not working. Okay, inner.html. Is inner.html correct?
It's all got to be
Capitals?
capitals.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, that's the consequence of not doing that at all on a daily basis. You are right. You see? So it works. I got my first element here. But this technique, even though is okay, it has two main problems. At the moment, it's just one element. But as soon as I need to display multiple elements, you need to play around with strings. So even though you could have an array and then join it and all these things, right? It could be complicated. And also the second problem, which is very important, very, very, very important, is inner.html is extremely slow. So you can talk about performance. The employer will be surprised if you know these things, right? So tell them, I could use inner.html, but on top of the complexity of building up a string with your markup, inner.html is very bad in terms of performance. So as soon as the app starts growing, we'll get a performance penalty. Because of that, the elegant way to do that is creating nodes. So a node is a JavaScript object, right, that represents a DOM element. This is way, 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 way more performant. So let's do that. How do we create a node in JavaScript? Because up until now, we just been accessing existing nodes, but I want to create a new one. So to create a new node, I'm going to call it let to-do node equals document dot create element. This is the way we create a new node. And then we can pass an argument with the type of node. Is it a label? Is it a span? Is it an h1? Is it a div? I want to create a div, right? As simple as that. But obviously that element is nowhere, it's just in memory. So we still need to do a few things. Just to prove that the theory works, I'm going to add some text on it. So we can do inner text equals, and I'm going to display the text on the to-do, right? So how do we access the text on the to-do? To-do.text, exactly, thank you. Okay? And obviously now we need to return it, right? So we created a DOM element, we play around with it a bit, and then we return it. This is the way I would recommend you to work all the time. Whenever you need to create a new element, create a function. First create the element, div, span, label, h1, whatever. Do some operations with it, add a text, add a class name, add another element inside of it, which is what we're going to do in a minute, and then finally return it, right?
What's the difference between text content?
Text content.
No text content.
There is no difference as far as I'm aware. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Right? So, yeah, it works, right? But this is not what we want yet. This is very performant, but what is the checkbox? It's nowhere. So in reality, get to do node is a div with two elements inside of it. First, the checkbox, and then maybe a label or something to display the text, right? So get to do node, in reality, again, we need to do the same thing. Look, this is boilerplating, but once you master the strategy, it's all the time the same thing. We need to prepare that. So to do node, then append child. So then let's add the checkbox first. And I'm going to remove that line. How do we add the checkbox? We create another method. Get to do checkbox node. Right? And then we'll need another one for the text. So let's do the same thing. Append child, get to do label node. Right? So then we need to create two methods very similar. So function get to do checkbox node. Why do we need the TODO object in here to display a checkbox?
That's the content.
The content. Which content?
What you want to display.
Yes, but why? Which property on the TODO object will be relevant here? We want to display a checkbox.
That is text.
No. Which property here is useful for the checkbox? Is check, correct? We want to see if the checkbox is ticked or not, right? So we'll do that in a minute. But for now, again, the same thing. Remember, first, create the DOM element. Let checkbox node equals document.create element. Create element. It's going to be an input, right?
Yes.
And then for now, let's just return it. We'll see what happens in a minute.
Is it just returning just the checkbox without the text?
Is returning just the checkbox without the text. Exactly, because the text will be in a separate function. Function get to do checkbox node, again the to do. So thinking about the label, which property in the to do object will be relevant? Text. Exactly. So again the same thing. Again, and again. Label node equals document.create element. And I'm going to set it as a label. And then we can do label node dot inner text. We could use text contents as Justin said. That's up to you. This will be probably even more efficient, I believe. I don't have that information at the moment, unfortunately. But, oops, we can do to do text, right? And then we just return it. So let's recap. So to get a to-do node, we need two things: checkbox and label, right? So we created the checkbox, we created the label, and then let's see what happens. This is going to be interesting. Look, we got an input, which is good, but hey, this is not a checkbox.
Yeah, it's a text.
Why?
You didn't specify.
Exactly, because we have specified that we want an input, but we haven't told the browser what type of input. It could be text, it could be password, it could be email, it could be checkbox, it could be select, it could be slider with modern HTML. So there are multiple types of inputs. In reality, what I want to do is that input type equals checkbox. So in other words, I want to add an attribute called type. And this is again very important. How do we add attributes with JavaScript. So fortunately, with modern JavaScript, you can make it easily. That used to be very painful long time ago, but now you can do set attribute, which receives two arguments. First of all, the name of the attribute or the key type, and the value. What's the value here? Checkbox. Exactly. Thank you. Checkbox. Right? So then let's see if it works. Exactly. With the checkbox. But now wait a minute. It's not, I said that checkbox should be checked, but it's not. So how do we do that? And this is one of the tricky things about JavaScript. So what I want to do, please, first of all, think on the string, right? So what do you want to achieve? So what I want to do, I got that already, but to check and, correct, to check and,
Is it like an event listener thing or checked?
checked, no. So checked is an attribute, but that's dodgy. That's a weird thing about JavaScript. That's lots of people has been complaining for lots of years, because if I have an attribute called checked, I would expect to be able to do that. True or false, right? Which makes sense because then it's easy to swap. But unfortunately, it doesn't work in that way. So even if checked is false, the checkbox will be ticked. So as soon as the checked, it only looks for the attribute name, not the value. That's weird. That's why, fortunately, modern JavaScript libraries and frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue, they give you this utility. So they wrap that. So with modern libraries, you can definitely do it. But with vanilla JavaScript, you can't. Because of that, in other words, we need to add just the attribute if needed. If not, we won't add it. How can we add an attribute dynamically? Well, it's very easy in reality, right? Look, the only thing we need to do is if TODO dot is checked, then add the attribute. Checked, and as the value doesn't matter, I'm going just to leave it as an empty string. Right? So if we try that, look at that. Now you see the input is automatically checked. And if we check the flag from true to false, then it's not checked anymore, right? Any question? Right? The last thing I would like to do today is I would like to change the style of the to-do. So whenever the checkbox is ticked, I want to change the style, maybe add a line through or something like that, right? So let's talk about CSS a little bit. So again, from an abstraction point of view, what I want to do is on this div, I want to add a class name, right? I want to add a class name. Is checked or something like that. And then based on that class name, on the CSS, I'll do my magic, right? So how can we add a class name? There are different strategies. But again, I'm going to keep it consistent. So what's consistency here? A class name or a class, ignoring the React world, just a class, is literally an attribute, right? Same as type, same as checked. So the only thing we need to do is, look, we can do to-do node dot set attribute class name and then the name of the class. So if I do that, is checked, right?
Isn't it class?
It's class, yes, you're right. Yeah, I'm still thinking on React. You see, it says class. Indeed, you're right. So class attribute and then the value is checked. So then on my CSS, right? So look, at the moment, this is the only class, which could be okay. I mean, let's start easy. Let's make it simple. So if I do is checked, so let's change the background color. Let's see if that makes any sense.
Color.
No, you don't need it. You don't need it. It's a shorthand. I mean, you could do it, definitely, if you want. You can explain that as well. You can use background or background color. Right? So you see, it works, right? But the problem is, if I unclick it, there are no differences. So we want to make it dynamic. And to help on this, so yeah, I'm going to do something interesting here. So I'm going to add another class called TODO item, right? Why? Because first of all, I want to be able to access the TODO item, regardless of whether it's checked or not. And then close the parentheses. Which parentheses?
Not the premise, you've got class, you've got to do.
So this is a class, and then I can add multiple classes in here, right?
Right, so.
Right. So if we do that, you see, well, I added the padding, right? Just to prove it works. And now, in reality, what I want to do, because each check is very generic, so I want to do that. You know how to concatenate class names to improve specificity, right? So if I go to a TODO item, do some padding. But then if I go to a TODO item which is checked, then I want to do something else, right? So how can we do it? So the first part of the string will be always the same, but the second part will be dynamic. You should know how to do it. There are different ways. It's a string, it's a dynamic string, right? So I'm going to use a template literal. So with a template literal, you remember the backticks thingy? So we can do, how do we call it? TODO item, and then, look, I'm going to add a sexy expression here. I'm going to do TODO dot is checked, then is checked. Otherwise, nothing, just an empty string. You see? All my TODO item elements will have that class, and then if they are checked, I'll do that. If not, empty string, right? So then, if we do that, right? And that's interesting, because when I uncheck it, it doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? Because we are assuming that the UI will be re-rendered automatically for us, which is extremely optimistic. The UI doesn't get refreshed unless we tell the browser, right? And that's why working with vanilla JavaScript to handle the state of the app is so error prone, because you need to remember that whenever you change something, you need to re-render. How can we do it? So if I remember correctly, and I'm just guessing at the moment, this is my input checkbox. So I want to capture value change. So I want to access the checkbox, and then I want to add a new attribute called onChange. So whenever you change something, I want to re-render. I want to update the data model and then re-render. So let's see if that makes any sense. First of all, I'm going to create a function to call it toggle checkbox. So let's see if that works. Function toggle checkbox. Right? Let's assume that for now we just have one checkbox, right? We may require several sessions to complete the example, but let's keep it easy. Let's keep it easy. So we can do model.todos. Again, I'm going to assume we have just one. We'll change that in the future. Is checked equals, I want just to toggle it. If it was true, I want to make it false, and vice versa. You see? So the value is the opposite. If it was true, now it will be false. If it was false, now it will be true, right? And then I need to re-render. So I need to call the re-render todos. As I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, this is also a great opportunity to prove how good developer you are. And how can you prove it? Adding breakpoints. I'm just 50% confident with what I did. So I'm going to go to sources, and I'm going to open the controller, and I'm going to add some breakpoints. I want to see if when I refresh, I want to see if that function gets invoked or not. And we'll see in a minute, in a second. So if now I click on the checkbox, boom, it's good, right? That proves my theory. Toggle checkbox has been invoked. And then, is that correct? So we got model, todos, correct, 0, correct, is checked. Correct. So I think that's correct. So then, at the moment, the value is true. But if I move to the next line, now the value should be false. Exactly. And now, what happened if I finish the script? Do you notice what happened? Why? Why? It's creating a new checkbox every time.
Because it's re-rendering, it's refreshing, re-rendering.
Yeah. So every time you call re-render, it's appending a new child. But we are not cleaning the canvas, right? So when we re-render, the first thing we need to do is clean what we had before and then render from scratch, right? And that's interesting because this may not be trivial. Again, this is a good opportunity to remember that technically speaking, you can do that. You can do that, and that should work. Perfect. But don't do that. It's okay if you do it and then you tell them we should not do that, because that proves that you really know what you are doing, right? You know the right thing, but you also know how to not do the things, right? So that will give you a very positive attitude to the employer. So the correct way to do it, you remember to add childs, we did this kind of looping thingy, right? So to remove childs, we can do similar thing on the other way around. So, and I don't remember the syntax about that, which is okay. You don't need to know everything up front, right? But it's something like that. So you can do while root node dot, there is a way, is or has child nodes, I think. Yeah. So we can say, if I remember correctly, while this element has children, delete, right? So how do we delete? We can do root node dot delete, remove child, maybe? Yeah, I think remove child will remove the first child. So then, does it have any children? Remove it. Does it have any children? Remove it. Does it have any children? No. Okay, done. And again, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, that may work. Let's have a look. You see, something is wrong, but I noticed quickly because I got the console, right? Uncaught error, failed to execute remove child, one argument required, right? So we need to pass which child do we want to remove. So root node dot first child. Actually, let me have a look. First is first child or first element child? I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest. But let's try that. Remove child. Wait a minute. I changed that, right? Then is it? I think it's the first one. First element child, maybe. No. Okay. So I don't remember how to do that. Root node has child nodes. Root node remove. I thought there was a remove for child. Root node dot remove. I don't remember. So, but that's okay. Let's find it, right? JavaScript remove all child nodes, and our friend Stack Overflow sometimes gives us the answer. You see? You notice that this is good, right? Because this is exactly what we've been talking about. So while so that's different, right? While it has a first child, root node first child, remove child. All right, so we were closed, but the condition was wrong. But that's good, right? Because that's even easier. It's more readable. While there is a first child, remove it. That's it, right? So if we try again, you see, boom, it works, right? Again, there is nothing wrong if at some point you don't know how to do something. It's okay to search on the internet, right? We're in 2018. Other question is if you need to go to internet on every single step. That means that you don't know what you're doing. But it's okay to tell them, hey, I know the idea, even if you do that, right? So the idea was correct, but we didn't remember the syntax exactly. So for these kind of things, it's okay to be honest. That proves that you're a human, right? As far as you explain and you share your honest thoughts, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to leave it here. I'm happy to continue with the exercise in the future, if you want, if you think this is useful. My suggestion now is please do the same thing, because the chances you get a similar problem are relatively high, right? So get familiar how to add elements to the screen, how to remove elements, how to add an attribute, how to add text, blah, blah, blah. Any question? No? Does that make any sense? Yeah? Cool. So keep trying. If you have any question, let me know. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.